Welcome to Bedtime Myths and Mysteries. Tonight, we journey to a remote Scottish isle, battered by wind and sea, where the echoes of Sow-wen linger, and where the last bonfire once burned, a flame that kept the dead from wandering too far, and carried the memories of generations. The isle rises from the North Sea like a jagged crown of stone and grass. Cliffs tumble into waves that churn like molten silver, their edges frosted with salt spray. In the spring and summer, the fields yield barley, oats, and root vegetables, and the small village seems almost timeless. Thatched roofs lean into each other for warmth, and narrow cobbled streets wind between cottages that have held families for centuries. The villagers live in quiet harmony with the land and the sea. They rise at dawn, tending to sheep, fishing in the mist-shrouded coves, and gathering the fruits of the earth. Their lives are marked by the seasons, by the rhythm of the tides, and by the ancient rituals that whisper through their homes, passed down in Gaelic phrases and songs. Even in the darkest winter, there is a sense of continuity, a knowledge that those who came before still watch, still guide, still linger in the thin veil between life and death. Every year, as the leaves turn gold and the air grows sharp with frost, the villagers prepare for Samhain. It is the time when the veil between the living and the dead grows thin, when the spirits of the ancestors move close, and when offerings are placed upon the hearth and in the bonfires to honor, protect, and remember. The people of the isle believe the flames themselves carry the prayers and warnings, that without them, wandering spirits might roam freely, and the coming winter could claim lives more readily than it already does. The largest and most sacred fire is always built in the center of the village. Stones are gathered from the cliffs, shaped into a circle, and filled with peat and wood, dry as tinder from months of careful tending. Elders teach the children to carry offerings of grain, root vegetables, and baked bread, explaining that each act is both a gift and a safeguard. They chant in Gaelic, their voices rising and falling like the waves below. Aithne na hoidche, failte do na spioradan. Spirit of the night, welcome the wandering souls. It is said that on the nights when the veil is thinnest, the fire glows with a light of its own, brighter and warmer than it should be, as if the spirits themselves breathe through the flames. Shadows stretch and dance in ways that no human can fully trace. The villagers move quietly, aware that even the smallest sound might disturb what lingers unseen. In this time, one family holds the most sacred responsibility, the MacAlistairs. Fishermen, farmers, and custodians of the old ways, their lineage stretches back centuries. Each generation has tended the bonfire, kept the rituals, and ensured that the prayers of the living reach the ears of those who have passed. The eldest, a man named Mallistairs, carries the knowledge of chants, offerings, and the delicate balance between protection and invitation. His wife, Moira, prepares the food and sweets that will burn or float in the flames. And their youngest, Eilidh, carries the curiosity and reverence of youth, learning the ways that have protected her family for generations. As October wanes, the isle grows quieter. Birds migrate south, the sheep are brought closer to the cottages, and the cliffs grow sharper under the wind. The villagers work tirelessly, not out of fear alone, but out of respect. Respect for the land, for their ancestors, and for the ancient cycle that has shaped their lives. Each preparation for Samhain is deliberate. The placement of stones, the kindling of firewood, the weaving of garlands from autumn leaves. Even the smallest misstep is thought to ripple into the night, drawing attention from those who walk unseen. On the eve of the last bonfire, the MacAlistairs prepare their offerings. Eilidh walks along the edge of the cliffs, gathering driftwood washed ashore by the tides. She feels the cold spray on her face and imagines the spirits moving just beyond the mist, invisible but watching. The village is hushed, almost holding its breath, and even the waves seem to break more gently against the rocks. As darkness falls, a heavy cloud settles across the sky, tinged with moonlight that pierces only in streaks. Lanterns are lit in each home, small fires meant to guide and protect. And in the village square, the Mallistairs begin the building of the central fire. Stones are arranged carefully, peat stacked, and the offerings placed in neat bundles. Alistair begins to chant, his voice low and melodic, weaving Gaelic words that speak of protection, remembrance, and the fragile bridge between life and death. It is in these early hours that the veil is at its thinnest. Shadows move in ways that seem impossible. The mist curls like fingers along the ground, and for a moment, the air is alive with unseen motion. Even Eilidh feels it, a pull in her chest, a weight that is not entirely sorrow, not entirely fear, but something in between. She watches the flames dance as her grandfather continues the chants, and wonders if she will ever truly understand the power of what they do tonight, or if it will always remain just beyond her grasp, like a dream that vanishes when she blinks. And as the first sparks take hold, glimmering like captured stars, the last bonfire begins to breathe. The night settled over the island like a velvet cloak, dark and heavy, pierced only by the flickering light of the lanterns and the growing bonfire in the village square. Eilidh stood close to the circle of stones, her small hands folded in reverence as she watched her grandfather, Alistair, move with the precision of centuries of practice. Each motion, each chant, had been learned from his father and his father before him, stretching back to ancestors who had tended these fires long before any written record of the Isle existed. The Mallistairs' voices rose together in Gaelic, weaving an incantation meant to honor, protect, and communicate. Nas biorad an math, nas biorad an dion, comla rin sin an oidche seo, good spirits, protective spirits. Together we honor this night. Each word resonated through the village, echoing off the cliffs and carried on the wind across the sea. Even the waves seemed to respond, rolling gently as though in time with the rhythm of the chant. The villagers, though few, gathered at the edges of the square. Each held their own lantern or small bundle of offerings. Children watched with wide eyes, some craning their necks to see beyond the smoke and firelight, hoping for a glimpse of something extraordinary. The elders, leaning on weathered walking sticks, hummed quietly, offering their own silent prayers. Every person felt the invisible pull of the thin veil, a connection between the living and the dead, as old as the isle itself. Eilidh's heart quickened as she placed the final offering into the fire. It was a simple loaf of bread, baked with herbs gathered from the cliffs and the fields. She knelt, whispering a personal plea, calling silently to ancestors she had never met, asking for protection and understanding. For a moment, the flames leapt higher, swirling around the offerings as though responding. A sudden warmth brushed her face, and she felt a presence, soft and sorrowful, brushing the edges of her mind. Her grandfather's voice cut through the night, steady and commanding. The fire must not die, Eilidh. You must tend it, even as the wind fights us. The spirits listen more closely than we can imagine. She nodded, heart pounding. Carefully she added more kindling, coaxing the flames higher. Shadows moved at the periphery of the firelight. Some were natural, cast by the dancing flames, but others seemed different. They stretched in impossible ways, flickering with a life of their own. Eilidh blinked, convinced for a moment that she saw the shapes of people in the smoke, tall, robed, and silent, standing just beyond the circle of stones. Alistair spoke again, lowering his voice to a near whisper. Do not fear what walks between the worlds tonight. They are the ancestors, watching, protecting, but also reminding us. We must remember them, or the fire will not protect us. The wind shifted, stronger now, tugging at hair and clothing. The waves crashed against the cliffs with a hollow roar, as if amplifying some ancient lament. The villagers drew closer, instinctively holding hands, forming a chain of presence around the fire. The flames flared suddenly, bright and golden, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. Eilidh felt a tug at her chest again, the same pull she had felt when gathering driftwood earlier, stronger now, insistent. And then the whispers began, soft at first, as if carried on the wind, then clearer, almost coherent. Voices speaking in the old Gaelic, words she did not fully understand, yet felt deep in her bones. Voices of those who had tended the fires centuries before, of parents, siblings, neighbors long gone. A sorrowful melody, mournful and sweet, drifted across the square, wrapping around the villagers like a cold, gentle hand. Eilidh shivered. "Grandfather," she called, her voice barely more than a breath. Alistair turned slowly, eyes reflecting the firelight. "Do you feel them?" he asked. "The spirits are near, always near. Tonight, more than ever, because it is the last fire. Our hands are few, our voices are fading. We must hold it, even as it slips from our world." The fire flickered dangerously. A gust of wind tore through the square, sending sparks flying into the darkness. The villagers cried out, but no one was harmed, yet. The shadows beyond the flames seemed to stretch closer, indistinct shapes shifting against the night sky. For the first time in many years, the fire threatened to falter, its light dimming as if the spirits themselves were testing their devotion. Eilidh hurried to the circle, adding wood, coaxing the flames higher. The whispers became voices, singing softly, almost in harmony with the chants of the MacAllistairs. Names, long forgotten by the living, were spoken, carried on the wind, brushing against her ears like gentle fingers. Then she saw them clearly, figures emerging from the mist, not threatening, but solemn and sorrowful. Tall, robed, faces both familiar and impossible. Ancestors she had never met, yet somehow recognized. They moved with the rhythm of the wind, circling the fire without stepping into it. The warmth of the flames kissed their robes, yet they remained unscathed, their eyes fixed on the family tending the last bonfire. Alistair's voice rose above the whispers. "Tonight, we remember. Tonight, we honor. Tonight, we do not fail them, and they do not fail us." But even as he spoke, Eilidh felt the pull grow stronger. The fire shivered under the gusting wind, threatening to die completely. The shadows of the ancestors seemed to stretch toward the flames, and a cold dread swept over her. If the fire went out, the veil would not hold. And in that instant, Eilidh understood the truth that had been whispered for centuries. The last bonfire was not just a flame, it was a bridge. A fragile, living bridge that connected the past and the present, the living and the dead. If it faltered, the spirits might not simply watch. They might reach beyond memory, beyond protection, to claim what should have remained sacred. The wind tore through the village square with increasing force, carrying the mist from the cliffs into the circle of stones. Sparks danced higher, some vanishing into the darkness, others burning low before they could touch the offerings. Eilidh clutched a bundle of peat in her arms, her small hands raw from the cold and effort, but she refused to let the fire die. Her grandfather's chants echoed in her ears, blending with the whispers and the wailing of the unseen spirits. Alistair moved among the villagers, urging them to add what they could to the flames. Even the elders, stooped and frail, carried kindling, knowing that this night demanded more than ordinary devotion. Every heartbeat in the village seemed to synchronize with the fire, and with each flicker, Eilidh could feel the presence of the ancestors growing stronger, yet heavier, more insistent. Suddenly, the flames faltered, sinking low as a gust swept through the square. The warmth retreated, leaving a chill that seeped into bones and hearts. Eilidh's breath caught in her throat. The whispers grew urgent, insistent, almost sorrowful cries that rose above the wind. "Do not let it die! Do not let it die!" She ran to the fire, throwing herself onto her knees, trying desperately to rekindle the embers. Her fingers dug into the peat, shaking small pieces into the fading blaze. The fire hissed and sputtered, flames licking at the offerings, but struggling to hold. The ancestors' figures in the mist recoiled, moving in closer, their faces elongated and sorrowful, shadows reaching as though to touch the warmth that had protected the isle for centuries. Moira, Eilidh's mother, stepped beside her daughter, her voice trembling yet firm. "We must hold it together. Remember the words, Eilidh. Remember the chants." Together, they sang the Gaelic prayers, their voices shaking at first, then gaining strength as the fire responded, sparking upward once more. But it was fleeting. The wind was relentless. Each breath of air threatened to swallow the flames, and the village square seemed to shrink under the weight of the night. Eilidh looked at her grandfather. Alistair's face was pale, drawn, eyes reflecting the dancing firelight. "This is the last time," he said softly, almost to himself. "We are too few now. The traditions, the hands that tended them, they are gone. We cannot keep the fire alive forever." The words struck Eilidh like a stone. Her small heart ached at the thought of the island unprotected, at the loss of the flames that had watched over generations. She clutched the ashes of a fallen ember and whispered, "Please, stay with us. Please, don't leave us." The wind shifted again, colder and sharper, cutting through the village like a blade. The whispers rose to a chorus of sorrowful lamentation. The ancestors' shadows moved faster now, circling the failing fire, faces contorted in silent grief. It was as if the spirits themselves were mourning the end of something sacred, the final failure of a tradition that had endured longer than any living memory. Then, with a sound like dry leaves cracking underfoot, the flames faltered completely. A sudden darkness fell over the square, thick and heavy, as if the night itself had descended to swallow the village. The ancestors' figures pressed closer, outlines shimmering, sorrow palpable. Eilidh felt a chill pass through her chest, a weight she could not bear. The fire, the bridge between worlds, was gone. Alistair fell to his knees, clutching Eilidh's hands. "It is finished," he whispered. "We did all we could. The fire, the protection, it is gone from our hands." The ancestors' shadows lingered for a long moment, almost palpable in their presence, and then, as if acknowledging the devotion and grief of the living, they receded slightly. The whispers softened to echoes, drifting into the night. The veil had thinned and trembled, but it had not broken entirely. Eilidh knelt among the ashes, tears burning her cheeks. She could feel the weight of centuries pressing against her heart, the sorrow of countless ancestors mourning the loss of their guardians. But even in grief, there was a trace of understanding, that the fire had been more than warmth and flame. It had been love, devotion, and remembrance, carried across generations by hands and hearts. The villagers rose slowly, somber and quiet. The last bonfire had burned its final light. The island would be colder, darker, and the traditions of protection would pass into memory. Yet, in the hush of the cliffs, in the sigh of the waves, in the faint warmth lingering among the ashes, the spirits remained. They lingered not in anger, but in sorrow, and perhaps in hope that some part of the devotion would continue in the hearts of those who remembered. Eilidh stood, staring at the horizon, where the moon glimmered faintly through the clouds. She whispered a final prayer to the ancestors, a promise to carry the memory forward. And though the fire was gone, she felt a measure of peace. The last bonfire had ended, yes, but the love, the ritual, and the remembrance would endure, as enduring as the stones beneath her feet, as eternal as the sea that crashed against the cliffs. In the quiet that followed, the village seemed to breathe again, carrying the sorrow and reverence of the night like a soft wind. The last bonfire had burned, but its story, The story of devotion, loss, and remembrance would never fade. The morning after the last bonfire dawned pale and cold. A faint mist clung to the cliffs, curling around the cottages and drifting along the narrow cobbled streets. The villagers emerged slowly from their homes, moving quietly, almost reverently, toward the ashes of the fire that had once protected them. The scent of smoke lingered in the air, mingling with the salt of the sea, a faint reminder of the night that had passed. Eilidh walked barefoot through the soft ash, her heart still heavy from the sorrow she had felt the night before. She traced the circle of stones with her fingers, feeling their rough edges, cold and eternal. The fire was gone, but the memory of it lingered, a pulse in the earth, in the wind, in the quiet corners of the village. She could almost hear the whispers of the ancestors, soft and sorrowful, echoing in the rhythm of her heartbeat. Alistair and Moira stood beside her, their faces pale, lined with grief, but also with understanding. "The fire has ended," Alistair said softly, his voice carrying across the ashes. "But its memory is still with us. The ancestors watch, and they will not forget." The villagers gathered around the remains of the bonfire. Some laid flowers upon the stones, others knelt in silence, offering their own prayers. Even the children, eyes wide and tearful, sensed the weight of the night, the end of a centuries-old tradition, the fading of a bridge between worlds. The elders whispered tales of Sow-wen, recalling the fires of their own youth, when the flames had roared and the spirits had walked openly among them. Eilidh felt a hand on her shoulder, Moira's, steady and warm. "It is not the end," her mother said. "We carry it in our hearts now." That is what keeps the memory alive. As the villagers dispersed, the mist seemed to pulse with a gentle rhythm, as if breathing. Shapes moved just beyond the edge of vision, indistinct but unmistakably present. The ancestors had not left. They lingered in the fog, in the stones, in the hearts of those who had tended the last bonfire. Their sorrow was tempered by the devotion they had witnessed. Though the fire was gone, the spirit of Sow-wen endured, echoing through memory and story. Eilidh lingered near the cliffs, gazing out at the churning sea. The horizon was a pale silver, the sun hidden behind clouds, yet a faint glow hinted at warmth to come. She whispered a final Gaelic prayer, calling to the ancestors, to the spirits of the Isle, and to the memories of every soul who had ever tended the fire. "Nas bioradan math, nas bioradan dion, com la rinsin an oidcheseo." The wind carried her words across the cliffs, mingling with the cries of gulls and the distant roll of waves. For a heartbeat, the mist shimmered as if responding. Eilidh felt a gentle warmth brush her cheek, fleeting but real, as though the spirits themselves had acknowledged her devotion. And then the village returned to its rhythm, quieter now, but alive. The sheep grazed in the fields, the tide moved steadily against the cliffs, and the cottages stood resilient against the cold wind. Life continued, as it always does, yet the night of the last bonfire lingered in every shadow, every whisper of wind, every pulse of memory. Years later, travelers would speak of the Isle, describing its cliffs, its mist, and the peculiar hush that seemed to settle over it during the month of October. Some would sense the echoes of flames long extinguished, and some, if they listened closely, would hear the faint, sorrowful whisper of Gaelic words carried across the wind. "Remember us. Honor us. Keep the fire in your heart." The last bonfire had ended, yes. The flames were cold, the stones silent. But in the hearts of the living, and in the mist that clung to the cliffs, it lived on. The fire, though no longer burning, had become something more enduring, a memory, a story, a bridge that could never be fully extinguished. And so the island endured, watched over by ancestors and spirits, guarded not by flame, but by remembrance. On quiet nights, when the wind is just right and the mist drifts low, the villagers say you can still feel the warmth of the last bonfire, soft, sorrowful and eternal, reminding those who remember that some lights never truly die.